Hello and welcome in to another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I'm your host, Trevor Scott, joined by my co-host, Matt Giraldi.
What's going on, guys?
And today we are going to be getting into our receiver tier. So we're going to change up our receivers again. We're going to talk about a tier of 4 players that are in like the wide receiver 2 range and how we would rank these guys, whether we think they're worth a start this week or not. And so we're looking forward to maybe getting into there's some injury situations. One of them's a Thursday night player. I know you were just kind of getting on me for having that, maybe talk about guys that had a little bit more solidified roles. But I do think that these guys are worth talking about, and we could talk about some of their teammates in the situations this week too, and just talk through kind of what we do in each situation. So also, if you don't mind, we're on a quest to try and get to 300 subscribers. So if you are new here and could hit the subscribe button for us, we'd appreciate the support quite a bit. And look forward to breaking that 300 mark. Hopefully this week, maybe next week, we'll see.
Close.
We're getting very, very close. I think we're only 2 subs away at this point from getting there. So would appreciate the help on that front. So now let's get into the players here. Our first player we're going to talk about is Zay Flowers. So this is the Thursday night football player. Hopefully you're hearing this before the game starts, but either way, you're probably starting Zay Flowers, so hopefully you can get him in there. He goes up against the Bengals. I think this is an excellent matchup for him. We just got news Isaiah likely is going to be out too, so like maybe a little less targets on that front. And I think the Bengals, they've been playing good. They can rack up points. The Ravens can't stop anybody in the secondary, so the game script, which is something we talk about a lot with Zay Flowers, should be favorable in a way where he should be able to rack up some yardage here. 4 of his last 5 games, over 100 yards. I would guess that he's going to do that again this week. I don't think Deontay Johnson is fully read into the offense. Again, I've been saying that that Zay Flowers is probably a sell because I do think Deontay should be taking on more of a role in this offense. And the snaps last week were a little funky too. I think they were up by a lot, so I think it was kind of end of game too. But Zay Flowers only played 53% of the snaps, and he only played 2 snaps with Deontay Johnson, and Deontay played like 12 snaps. So they only played 2 snaps together. The 10 snaps were Deontay and Bateman on the field. So I thought that was an interesting development if it is going to be some sort of thing where they don't expand to 3 wide receiver sets and how that's ultimately going to shake out. So continue to watch that throughout the week. But I do think in this game, it's not going to be a big Deontay game. I think it's going to be a big Zay Flowers game. I would hope to see over 100 yards in this game. And, he only has 2 games with a touchdown, so I don't think necessarily he's going to score. He doesn't get used a ton in the red zone either. But I do think it's reasonable to think he could have like 8 targets, 7 catches, 110 yards, something like that in this game.
Yeah, I mean, the last time they played, he had 12 targets in that overtime game. So I think you're right in terms of game script. I was surprised to see that Ravens are actually a 6.5 point favorite. So maybe a little bit bigger than I would have thought. But this is the highest projected over under the week. So I really like Flowers in this one. I thought he looked great last week, and he did get that end zone target as well.
Going on to the next player here. This one is the one that doesn't have really any bad circumstances around it other than the matchup, and that's Terry McLaurin. He goes up against Pittsburgh, which is a tough matchup, but really it's hard not to trust McLaurin at this point. He's had double-digit fantasy points in every single game since week 3. He's been very consistent. Last week, he only had 2 catches for 19 yards, but just happened to score on both of them. So it didn't matter. Ended up with 15 points. And going up against Pittsburgh, I think, presents a situation where Pittsburgh is probably going to be able to score. This will be one of the better teams that the Commanders have faced over, the last 3 weeks. They got Carolina, Chicago, and the Giants. So obviously Chicago's defense is pretty good, and he went 5 for 125 there, which was one of the best performances we've seen from a wide receiver in that difficult matchup. So I think in terms of overcoming the matchup, I do think that McLaurin is uniquely positioned to be able to do it, but I do think Flowers is somebody that I'd play ahead of him this week. And the other dynamic here in the passing game for Washington is I very much expected them to add a receiver to help McLaurin and to help Daniels over the middle, and they didn't do it. They didn't go out and get a receiver. I know they were heavily rumored. They did go and get Lattimore at the deadline, so that's probably where a lot of their trade attention was to shore up corner, and they were probably trying to get something done for, maybe Slayton, Thielen, somebody like that, but nothing ended up coming together. So I think in terms of target volume, that McLaurin should continue to see a very large volume going through the rest of the year.
He's at his age 29 season this year. He finally has a really good quarterback. He's had to deal with Taylor Heineke, those type of players his whole career. So
Alex Smith on his last leg.
Yeah, when he was injured. And then who else was
his
say.
quarterback when he was a rookie. Was it like Jason Campbell days? I feel like it's been so long since McLaurin has been there and just has looked like a number one, but just hasn't really got it there. I mean, Dwayne Haskins was there for a
Haskins,
while.
yeah.
You know, RIP to Haskins, but you know, it's he's had some tough quarterback play, and with Daniels now, and that's what we talked about in the preseason. Right, Daniels is a rookie. We didn't know Daniels was going to be this as a passer, even through the first 2 weeks when Daniels wasn't really throwing the ball down the field. It was like, oh, this is looking like it's not really going to work out, and then Daniels kind of turned into
exploded.
This,
exploded like the first 2 weeks,
down the field, high completion percentage passer, so it was like, oh, okay, well, I mean, if we would have known this is what Daniels was going to be, we would have had McLaurin ranked in the top 20, but if it would have been Caleb Williams production, we would be looking pretty good for having him outside the top 30.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, the first 2 weeks, his average depth of completion was like 2 yards or something. Like it was
2.5. Yep.
Yeah, it was like so low, and I was like, okay, here we go. McLaurin's gonna have another bad year. But no, I mean, and what I like about McLaurin is like he doesn't complain. Like in a position where like there's a lot of like divas and like for how talented he is and how old he is now. Like I just think hats off to him. And even earlier in the year, I remember Daniels like bombed one over his head that would have been a walk-in touchdown. He just got right back up to the line and was fine with it. So I like him in this matchup. I do think that Steelers are a little bit tougher to run on than pass against, so maybe they do run into some issues there. I don't know is Brian Robinson going to be back for this game, or is it still kind of up in the air?
We'll see. He's so banged up that I wouldn't be surprised if they just continue. Like if I was in the Commander's position, you have Eckler and you have McNichols, right? You have a lot higher aspirations than week 10 of the regular season. So, I think you have serviceable running backs, and I think that would be my goal, would be to get Brian Robinson as healthy as possible going into the playoffs. Don't play him until he's 100%. The next guy we're going to talk about here is DeVonta Smith. So this guy has an injury question mark with AJ Brown, right? So AJ Brown has that MCL sprain. It's very mild apparently, and he looks like he could play, but in the event he doesn't play, this is like an obvious start. He's going to be like top 10 wide receiver. He would be first of this group, but assuming AJ Brown goes, I think I'd have him third here against Dallas. He has been excellent this year outside of one game. I don't know what happened against the Giants, but it was like a Saquon Barkley revenge game. And they literally didn't throw the ball, and they only had 2 targets to him. But in his other healthy games, he's had double digits in every game. He's scored 3 of the last 4 weeks outside of that Giants game after coming back from his injury. And now he goes up against Dallas, no Dak. They might not be able to score, and this is a division rivalry, so I anticipate they are going to try to run up the score on Dallas as much as possible. We saw DeVonta score on a deep shot. We saw him score on red zone touchdown, so it's like, I think he's involved at all areas of the field. He's an elite player. He's only wide receiver 17, but he's missed a game, and he's had a bye in there, so he's got like 2 weeks outside of like somebody like Zay Flowers, right? So on a per game basis, I'm assuming anyways that he outpaces Flowers, but I do think Smith, again, somebody I would definitely be trying to acquire if you could. I just don't think that there's really a buying window here. They have a very good schedule coming up too, with Washington, Rams, Baltimore, Carolina going into the fantasy playoffs. And, this is somebody that really can help you get there if you're a little bit lower in the rankings. But this week against Dallas specifically, I expect another big game from DeVonta Smith.
And maybe Cooper Rush can keep up. Like Cooper Rush is not a bad backup by any means. So maybe he can put up. I know their secondary is getting better in Philadelphia too, so it might be in for a long game. And if CD does miss, it could be very one-sided. But hopefully CD plays, hopefully AJ Brown plays, and hopefully Cooper Rush is good enough to keep the offense moving.
Yeah, I think he should be able to. I have decent amount of faith in Rush. I mean, remember when he was taking over from Dak? When Dak hurt his ankle a couple years back, it was like, is Rush going to stay the starter? He won like his first 2 games, and it was like the offense looked more on schedule, and it was like, wait, what's going on here? And then he lost a couple games. It kind of fell apart. And Dak took back over.
But it didn't help that Jerry Jones was like, oh yeah, maybe we got a quarterback controversy over here. Like,
yeah, he just loves the media attention. Yeah,
dude, he
wants all eyes on Dallas, no matter what. Yeah.
God, he's
increase that brand.
He's like, yeah, let's make a bad trade so people talk about Dallas. And they're like,
okay, my God, freaking Jonathan Mingo, dude, what is that? I know people are flaming that on social media, but the comparison with Hopkins, I don't know that I understand. You know, a 24-year-old second year wide receiver versus a 32-year-old Hopkins. Like, okay,
really
I
good
get
wide
it.
receiver
Hopkins is
versus a
better,
really
but
bad
like,
wide receiver. Yeah,
yeah,
I could see the vision.
maybe, right? I mean,
I'm
they have a year. They have a
I'm
second half
32.
plus
Like
a
I, you
whole
know, it
off
doesn't
season. You
age
know?
doesn't matter. I can't go out there and like what. I know a 24-year-old that's not going to outproduce DeAndre, but like, dude,
Oh
no,
man, dude,
he
I saw
sucks.
some film. I saw some film clips on Mingo, and one of them was like a perfect throw to the sideline. You know, like the throw was right on the sideline, so like Mingo
Yeah,
should have had to like stop and catch it, or like, you know, be breaking down if he had spatial awareness, and he just like ran through the sideline and like jumped back for the ball, but he like landed way out of bounds. I was like, dude, what the heck was that, dude? What are you
it
doing?
was it was actually it
Uh,
was an impressive catch in the sense that like it
he
was like a
grabbed it, but
Harlem
he was
it was
10,
like a
10 yards out
Harlem
of bounds.
Globetrotter type play. Like it was just
Yeah, Savannah
wildly.
Bananas, dude.
I
Yeah,
was
what are
gonna
you
say the
doing?
Savannah Bananas. He can, and I don't even think was Jonathan Mingo even good in college. Was he ever Ole Miss's
Well, I
leading
mean, he was picked
receiver?
39th overall. Okay, regardless of whether or not he was good, he was considered a top talent. I know. You think, oh, just because a GM was done with one pick doesn't mean that you give up a fourth. But I'm just saying, organizationally, I think it makes a little bit more sense when you put it in context that this player has multiple years of control still, and could possibly be the number two behind CeeDee Lamb next year, right? And like, I don't know. Mingo is somebody in fantasy circles that's kind of been like a dynasty darling. Like, oh, is Mingo ever going to take over as the one? Is Mingo ever going to become a thing? Is Mingo going to develop? You know, and like
Okay,
now we get those same questions just on Dallas.
okay. Well, Mingo was never the number one on Ole Miss, so if you want him to be a number one in the NFL, that's a little bit of a
Not number
stretch.
one. He's going to be number two behind CD. That's what I'm saying. If he can open up space too for the
Okay,
running
no.
backs or for Jake Ferguson, right? If he is going to be an outside receiver, I'm just trying to put it in context, right? That this
Okay,
guy
yeah.
is supposedly a high draft pick where you get multiple years of control with him still. So in
Are
terms of
you
Hopkins, where
still?
he's an 8-week rental, or I guess for the
I
Chiefs, maybe a couple
you know
more weeks on
I
top of that. But
I do think this is interesting because this is a similar situation to what's the dude from Penn State, Jahan Dotson, right? And you were not
no,
high on him when he
Dotson's
went
so
to
bad.
Philadelphia. So
No,
is it just you haven't seen enough of Mingo to make that decision and you had seen enough of Dotson, or do you just like truly like Mingo's game? I'm asking
absolutely, dude.
sincerely.
Mingo's been playing with Bryce Young, dude. We don't know. We have no idea if Mingo's good or not. The coaching staff has been a mess.
Dotson was
The
playing
offense
with
has changed both years, dude.
what's
No,
his name? Mr. Interceptions.
Mr. Interceptions.
But Dotson was picked in the first round.
Yeah, Dotson was a first rounder, and it's like yeah, no, you know what? But didn't Dotson go for a fourth round pick too?
I think so.
He did.
It
The
might
Eagles
have.
gave up a fourth round pick. They're not flaming them for picking up Dotson. I just don't like Dotson's situation there, right? Like I didn't think they needed a receiver. He's not going to be anything but the number 4 option on the offense. And number 5 was Saquon, right? It's just like they didn't need him at all. They did give up a fourth for him though, right? Another example of when you have 2 years of rookie control, that definitely garners more draft capital than somebody that's 32 on an expiring contract. That's all I'm trying to say. Like the social media stuff behind it never made any sense to me. It's like, yeah, if you're on an expiring contract, that's like a 5th round market value. If you're on a rookie deal where you don't have to pay him anything and you get 2 additional years of control, that's something that garners more draft capital amongst GMs.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the way you put that, they should have traded for Sky Moore too. I mean, just gone all in.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there's a difference when somebody gets a shot with one of the best quarterbacks in the league and does absolutely nothing. Literally can't even get open, can't get the ball. Right? There's difference there, right? We're talking about 2 talented prospects that didn't play with any quarterback or in a good
Okay.
system or anything, versus Sky Moore, who's been awful. Uh, in a good system with a good quarterback, you know.
Yeah,
So nobody thinks that they have a better situation than Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. So that's why Sky Moore's values
that's
through
true.
the floor.
Fair.
All right. Well, we got off on enough of a tangent there. I guess we're going to kind of swerve back to our start sits and go over our last player here, who's Darnell Mooney. He's wide receiver 12 on the year. Similarly, hasn't had his bye week and has played every week. So, right, that's going to just help push his um, total up, basically. But he's been awesome the last 2 weeks. Basically, when Cousins has been good is when Mooney has been good. They've been very tied together, right? He was good against Philadelphia. He was good against Tampa Bay both times. And he was good against Dallas last week. Scored in all of those games. And I think against the Saints, they're going to be looking to rack up points on the Saints division rival. They need to win. They need to keep winning, right, to secure their spot, not just in the division, but also in the conference. Like they're currently in third and they're only a half a game behind the Commanders. So they definitely are looking up at trying to climb the ladder even further beyond the division at this point. I think they have the division in hand pretty much at this point, right? 4-5. Tampa Bay is really their only challenger. And, I think, them at 6-3 and having beat them twice, this division is mostly over. So the Saints, though, I do think that they can rack up the points. No Lattimore. And if Drake London doesn't play, I kind of don't think London's going to play with the hip pointer. I do think he is going to try to go. But, I think he'll be limited if he does go. And I think Mooney is going to be the featured point of the offense this week.
This week, they're probably game planning for not having Drake London. So that could be more emphasis to Mooney. No Lattimore, which is great. And last week, too, I got to give you a little bit of a shout out. Mooney was your start of the week. You said you wanted to put him top 10, and he finishes wide receiver 10 on the week. Obviously, London went down. That, helped his upside, but good call. And I think Mooney, kind of like what we talked about with Terry McLaurin, getting this massive quarterback upgrade. Like I think we're seeing that with Mooney too. And I think it's really great to see, and people are understanding how talented he really is.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. With Mooney, right, 9 targets, he looks awesome. I mean, it's never been him either. Another guy where it was like the quarterback was always the issue, and then like he went to the Falcons, kind of got slept on this year in draft season. I mean, he was a late round pick, but like we were all looking at like, oh, finally they changed coaches. They have 3 major offensive weapons that are all going to be heavily involved in the offense, right? So it was like, oh, Mooney's going to be the 4th option, and it was like, oh, wait a second, that maybe should have been rolled back to say he has the opportunity to be the 2nd option. You got to make sure you get him just in case he is. And that's mostly been the case. I mean, I think Mooney at this point, maybe he gets a couple tough matchups coming up. Denver bye, Chargers in the next 3 weeks after this one against the Saints. So, that's a 3-week stretch where you maybe are going to like have to consider tempering expectations or limiting his exposure to your lineups, but we'll see how that ends up playing out this week against New Orleans. You want to get him in your lineups. Again, this is like a thing where we're ranking a set of guys. So if you do have all these guys, we're going to go Flowers, McLaurin, Smith, and Mooney, but I do still really like Mooney this week. I have him ranked inside the top 20 again, and that's not something that I think has been like routine for a lot of rankers. But for me, he's just been way up in the top 10, top 20, top 15. And last week, right, I said it in a great matchup, probably top 10. So I love Mooney as a player, and get him into your lineups this week. All right. And if you're still with us, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thank you guys so much for watching.
Later.